Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. It's the longest day of the year again, and 2 years ago on this day, I did an extensive test of the Jackery 1000 power system to see how long it takes to fully charge using 160 watts of solar panels. So today, I'm going to be doing a similar experiment, but using a different popular power system. We'll be using the EcoFlow Delta and using the 160 watt solar panel that this system could come with and see how long it takes to charge on the longest day of the year, June 21st of 2022. So here's kind of what you get with the EcoFlow. It has its own custom bag and a little box here. Not a great box, but this comes with some of the accessories, the cables that we'll be using with it to charge it up. It's a little bit heavier than Jackery. Let's see. Yeah, it feels quite a bit heavier than Jackery. Alright, so this system, we've got your AC outlets on this side. I'll just give you a comparison of what you got. AC output on this side. There's the car outlet. Okay, and here's the front side. Here you've got your USB charging cables. The Jackery gives you 2 USB-Cs and 2 regular quick charge USB version 3s. Here it's got a couple more USB ports for you here. So I really like the LCD panel here. It's a nice little color screen versus this one, but I don't know if it makes too much of a difference in practical use. One thing that I'm going to have to do before running this experiment is this is at 100% right now, and I'm going to have to discharge this. Probably get down to about 15%, let's say, before I do the recharging experiment. So to drain the battery on this thing, I'm going to be using it to heat up my coffee in the morning. And that should use up enough energy to drain the battery, I think, after a few cycles. We'll see how many cups of coffee I can make with this thing. So this thing uses 100 watts whenever it runs. So I could hear the fans on this thing turning on. So it's generating some heat on the inside. And looks like the output meter is pretty consistent with what this wattage meter says. So it seems that the output panel on it is quite accurate. We'll see how much total we use. So far we haven't used very much. This is probably going to make a lot of coffee over the week, I would imagine. Okay, so that's interesting. This thing is still going, providing wattage, 958 watts, but the display shut off here. How do we turn on the display again? Okay, so we turn back on the display. So this display doesn't stay on all of the time. Okay, so the water is now fully heated up, and about 3% of the battery has been drained. The fans are no longer running on this thing. So what that should give us somewhere around, I guess about at a 3% rate, somewhere near 35 cups of coffee or so. Another thing to note too is that this thing is quite full. I usually have about half that amount of water in there, so probably quite a bit more coffee or tea I could make out of this. Alright, it's the next morning. One thing to note is that it turned off. A feature of the EcoFlow Delta is that it automatically turns off after 30 minutes if both the AC and DC switches are off. But through my experiments with this, I found that after about 10 to 12 hours, the unit will also shut off if you're not using it, regardless of the AC or DC button status. The Jackery has a similar feature where after 12 hours of not drawing more than 10 watts, it's going to automatically shut off as well. Another observation that I made while doing this experiment is that when you have the AC powered on and it's running idle, apparently there's an AC inverter inside of it that's running and drains a couple of percentage points every hour on its own when you're not even pulling some power output. Heating up a single cup of coffee was draining about 3 to 5% of the battery, but just leaving it continuously running between heating up cups of coffee drained significantly more than that. Alright, so this LED was on for a while after I made my previous cup of coffee, and I think it might have been about an hour. This drained by 2%. As you can see right now, there's no power being drawn. It's showing up 0 wattage. I was curious to see whether the Jackery 1000 has the same issue when you're running the AC power on it. So I ran it for a little bit and noticed that there's a drain of between 1 to 4 watts consistently when you have the AC turned on. Alright, I got this battery down to about 15%. I think this is a good point that we could begin the charging process. I didn't do a good tally of the number of cups of coffee I was able to make because this thing kind of continually drained between the times I was running the kettle. So that's something to be aware of, is that once you have this thing up and running and you're running it continuously, even if you're not draining power, you're going to lose a few percent every hour or so. And another thing I noticed is that towards the end, like the last couple of times I used it, the power consumption drain seemed to go down faster than the first cups of coffee. So like the last one went from like 21% down to about 16% on one reheat of the kettle. So here is the solar panel that I'm going to be using. It's a 160 watt solar panel. Now this one is quite a bit heavier than the Jackery solar panel. However, it does give you 60% more wattage than one of them. Alright, so we're all set for the science fair. To give you a little comparison, here is the Jackery 100 watt solar panel. And you can see the size difference. However, if you're using the Jackery 1000, you're trying to charge it up, based on the analysis I did in the last video, you're probably best off having 2 of these, or maybe this one in a 160 watt rather than just using one of these, because it's going to be difficult to get a full charge in a single day if you're just using a single 100 watt to charge a Jackery. Alright, I'm rigging this up right now. The time is about 8:30, and okay, you got to use this adapter that came with the unit. So I put the panel down flat on the ground, and the power draw went down to 48 watts. Let's see, this is quite heavy. It's not very easy to position. You have to lean it up against something. But if I angle this towards the sun, that gives us a little bit more wattage. We're getting 85, maybe 90 watts if I angle it to point directly towards the sun. So the angle that you have it pointed at definitely makes a huge difference. Alright, the time is now 10 a.m. We got a little bit more sun out here. Let's see how much juice we're getting. Okay, we're getting actually 100, getting over 100, well, was at 120 watts input. It's quite varying right now. It's interesting. And the fans have just turned on. I'm not sure if you can see that very well. There's a lot of reflection. So we're at 22%, and this is it's bouncing around between 0 and 120 watts. You can see the power draw that we're getting from these solar panels. Goes up to like 110 and goes back down. Not exactly sure what that means, but I set up the Jackery here to see how much we're getting with the same level of sunlight using its solar panels, and we're getting about 100 watts as well. So the amount of power that we're getting is pretty close. We have 160 watts with both solar panel arrays. Alright, it's now 11:15, and because this thing's bouncing around on the power input, it's kind of difficult to tell whether we're getting an optimal amount of sunlight on these solar panels. I think that we are, you know, maybe if I angle this, because the sun's a little bit higher now right now, maybe if I angle these panels a little bit more up, that would give us a little bit more power, I would think. Yeah, I think that helped. So you gotta kind of rotate these panels in the direction of the sun throughout the day as the sun moves around. Let's take a look at how the Jackery's doing. Okay, so we're at a 98% charge right now, and it's drawing in about 75 watts. Alright, so let's see if we adjust this panel a little bit here. If we just bring it down somewhat, what that does to our power input. Does it change? It didn't seem to make any meaningful change. A little bit after noon right now, and this thing is 29%. Power inputs are still fluctuating, going up as high as 123 watts. Let's take a look at what the Jackery is doing. And here we are at 99%, pulling in 70 watts. Okay, so I re-angled the solar panel a little bit. We're getting 70, 72. I'll let it droop a little bit. We get 69, 68. So it's getting like 69 watts this way. If I prop it up just a little bit to straighten out these panels, it makes a difference of about 2 watts. The sun is very hot today. Temperature on the ground right now is 88 degrees. And we have some very strong sunlight. No clouds whatsoever. Alright, it's about 1:30. We're at 33%. Alright, it is just after 3 o'clock. It's interesting, the display seemed to have turned off automatically. We're pulling in 80, a consistent 87, 88 watts power right here from the solar panel. I don't know if my shadow is affecting it at all. Okay, so I get my shadow off of it, and it's going up to about 100. The sun is actually moving a little bit behind this right now, so this isn't perfectly aligned. As you can see, that there's a significant power drop right there. It's kind of hard to read the screen in the full sun, and the unit itself is pretty warm, especially the top of it. Yeah, this is really hot up here, and I think it's getting cooked in the sun. So that is an interesting problem. I probably should have moved this thing into the shade, but I don't have a really good way of propping up the solar panels. But I mean, I think that's something to be aware of. Look, even the sticker right here is peeling off. Let's see here. So this pattern on the top is unique. And that probably makes an interesting anti-theft sort of protection. You know, if somebody takes your unit, if you have a picture of the top of that, you can probably identify which unit's yours based on the pattern. But yeah, certainly if you're going to be charging this thing using the solar panels, you're probably going to want to put it inside of the shade. Oh, and by the way, we are at 42%, so not even half of a full charge, and we've been doing this since 8 o'clock, so was that about 5 hours of non-stop charging in ideal sunlight conditions, and we got 27%. Yeah, about 27% of this battery on the solar panel that comes with. Alright, this is currently at 46%, and the current temperature is about 93 degrees. We've had full sunlight all day. Alright, the time right now is almost 6 o'clock, and this is still pulling in about 90 watts. We're at 50% charge right now. Alright, we are out of sunlight here. Let's see what level of charge we got up to. We got up to 63%. Okay. Okay, so we finished our daylight experiment, and we got from 15% up to 63% charge on a day with very good sunlight. And I'm not exactly sure what these percentages correspond to in watt-hour capacity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to charge this up the rest of the way, and then I'm going to try to drain it, and we'll see at different points how many watt-hours of the 1260 capacity that this has, that as we're draining it, so that we could hopefully establish a curve, because I have the feeling that these percentages don't represent linear amounts. And one of the things that I kind of do like about this particular unit, the EcoFlow Delta, is that for plugging it into the wall outlet, you could use pretty much any standard computer cable. Fans on now, and it's charging at, wow, it's a lot more input than the solar panel. It's charging at a rate of about 1070 watts. Okay, so now I gotta drain the battery on this thing, and I'm going to be monitoring the kilowatt hours used, and we're going to compare it against where the percentage is. And let's see if we can establish a curve of how much kilowatt hours we used at any given amount of percentage, and that'll kind of give us an idea of how much juice is left in the battery at any of these percentage points. So I'm going to turn on the AC. Okay, and I'm going to run this hair dryer, and we'll kind of record those figures as they come through. So right now it's draining 1,621 watts. So in about 45 minutes, it's going to be really hot in here, and we should have an empty battery. And a reading of how many kilowatt hours we used at any given point in time. All right, power off. This electrical cord is actually really hot right now. In fact, it's so hot It's kind of hard to pull off the... Oh, that could burn you. Yeah, so all this got pretty darn hot from running the blow dryer. I'm going to give this a rest to cool off for a while before I recharge it again. Here's a graph of the points I plotted while draining the EcoFlow batteries using the blow dryer. The x-axis is the reading of the percentage indicator, and the y-axis is the reading of the wattage meter on how much energy we've used up to that point. I flipped this chart around horizontally so that the percentage numbers go down, which allows you to visualize time passing from left to right. From 100% down to 80%, we're draining power at a rate of about 14 watt-hours per percentage unit. From 80% down to 10%, where I tested this and ended the experiment, the power drain rate became roughly 8.2 watt-hours per unit of percent. This makes sense of why when I was doing the coffee experiment, the battery seemed to drain faster at the end of the experiment than it did at the beginning. If we assume that heating up one kettle used a consistent 42 watt-hours, then when the battery read above 80%, that would amount to about 3% at a rate of 14 watts. But once the battery indicator gets below 80% on this battery, that same amount of power makes a bigger impact on the indicator, which I calculate to be about 5.1%, consistent with what I saw in the actual experiment. Despite that one change in slope, 1 percentage point has been fairly consistent as a unit of power measurement while using this device. However, if we were to project this curve out to a 0% reading using the same rate of power drain of 8.2 watt-hours per unit of 1%, that would suggest that the total watt-hour capacity available to us is less than the 1,260 watt-hours advertised. However, I didn't want to take this below 10% because I was a little bit concerned that would be a little too stressful on the battery and potentially damage the unit. Additionally, this curve allows us to approximate the amount of power that we were able to get during the day using the 160 watt solar panel. We charged this from 15% in the morning to 63% by the end of the day, which at a rate of 8.2 watt-hours per percent gets us to a calculation of about 390 watt-hours. So I hope you found this video to be useful and informative. If you like this and want me to continue making more content about power systems like this, let me know in the comments. And be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. See you next time. Hey, how about that? Just after a couple days after I finished this video, I'm in the editing process, we have a huge power outage. So I'm using the EcoFlow Delta right now to power up my freezer so that all my food doesn't go bad.